Observe.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 12 of the Observe and Rapport show. I'm Kyle Brennan, joined as ever by my beautiful co-host, Keith Sullivan. Keith, how we doing in this new setup today?
We're doing pretty good. I like this a lot better, to be honest. It's weird. I thought this when I initially thought of it. I'm like, no one ever talks to each other like this.
Yeah,
like sitting this way, but it's a popular setup. So
yeah, even sometimes when you ever sit at like a picnic table with someone next to you and try to have a conversation that way.
Yes,
it's like the same kind of vibe.
Yeah, this is how you sit when you don't want to. Like you sit next to your wife at dinner because like you talk to the people in front of you. Now we're doing this today.
Yeah,
but it makes sense. You're talking to them, not to me.
Yeah,
or them, not to me.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, I think we're doing good though. I mean, we'll see if this works. This could be a wash for all we know.
For all we know, we've tried 4 different setups.
Yeah, you'd think we'd invest in this a little, but so far so good. No
low budget enterprise.
It's a low.
12 episodes. Maybe when we get to 100, we'll start.
You know, and people will start to smell it on us a little. You know, when you start throwing too much money at something, people go
Once we start...
you take the piss out of it.
Once Keith starts showing that Dunkin' logo outward towards the camera a little bit too much, and then people are like,
know.
they're...
You'll know. Remember that scene in Wayne's World?
Yeah, the Pepsi.
Here,
the
take
Reebok.
2 of these.
Yeah.
Yellow, tiny, different.
It's so perfect. It is funny, though, watching movies, because I work in advertising, and I worked at Anheuser-Busch. You see the subtle... For me, they're not subtle at all. When you just see someone holding a Budweiser, just like at the very bottom to show the label, and they're facing it towards the camera, you're like, oh,
sure,
they paid for that.
Yeah,
and
there's that famous instance in Goodfellas with the Marlboro packet being there for the helicopter scene. Apparently, that was like $1 million at least he spent on that or more, just to have that, making it realistic kind of thing.
Huge, yeah. I always notice those little things in ads and stuff.
Yeah,
which also in a drinking ad, they never show the person drinking, like the beer.
Interesting.
In any commercial that you see, a Bud Light commercial, Heineken, whatever, they're not allowed to show the person drinking beer. But in a movie, they can.
Really? Why?
I don't know. I just realized that, actually. Yeah. I just made that connection.
There's so many weird laws, man. People think things are a certain way. I just was listening to another podcast about, remember Bernie Sanders?
I do. Yeah, what happened to him?
So, I'm going to tell you. So he's been a politician his whole life, basically. And remember in 2016 election, he was people were like, Bernie, man, Bernie all day.
Bumper
Bernie
stickers and the hats and
everything. Even Rogan was like, I'd vote for him. Dude, he got on Rogan's show and I listened to the show and I called my friend who's like a huge capitalist. And he was like, I was like, dude, he makes a lot of sense. And he was like, Keith, remember what we talked about, okay? It doesn't work. Socialism doesn't work, whatever. But my point is that RFK was just talking about how, he's running and whatever. And the DNC made it the case that if whatever votes he gets in New Hampshire or Ohio or Idaho, one of those states, won't count for him. They'll count for Biden instead. And I heard that when he said that, and I was like, how was that a legal thing to do? Did someone just get shot with a shotgun outside? Did you hear that?
I think one of the power lines just exploded. I've heard that before. I remember once
that shook my seat.
I know. I was like, that was gunpowder almost.
Listen, we're talking.
Oh, that's 2. That's 3. Oh, it sounds just like an asshole driving his car.
Oh yeah, I hear the buzzing.
That's 3 pops.
Yeah,
it's probably this fucking Subaru.
That was one of those noisemaker machines. Anyway, so I was like, that sounds like bullshit. How could this be a democracy if they just go, no, any vote you get counts for me? So he explained it in further detail. Basically, the delegates from the 2 delegates from those states will not be allowed to go to the DNC the convention, the Democratic, so their votes won't be counted, basically. And when that happened so RFK was saying they did the same thing to me that they're doing to Bernie in 2016, and Bernie sued them, right? He's like, this is bullshit. How can this be a legal thing? And the court ruled, the judge was like, he was like, Bernie was like, it's rigged. And he's like, yeah, it is actually. Yeah, you're right. They did rig the game against you. But the thing is it's more like it's a private country club, this kind of organization of Democrats. Like, it's not really like it's a political entity. So there's nothing wrong legally with what they're doing. And it made me think of the George Carlin line, it's a big club and you ain't in it.
Yeah.
Like, it literally is a big club that you're not in. Forget about me and you. Fucking Bernie's not even in it.
You know, it reminds me of like when, because all this stuff, whenever someone tries to explain how...
Oh, no one's listening right now anymore.
Yeah, whenever anyone tries to explain to me how voting works and the House and the Electoral College, my brain just shuts off.
It makes no sense. That's
like,
why.
One, it's so confusing, and two, even if I did know how it worked, it wouldn't really serve me in any way whatsoever. Because I don't know. But to me, what you just described sounds like when someone, like your friend, you go away for the weekend to like an upstate, Airbnb, and your friend's like, let's play cards. we're gonna do a card game, and everyone's everyone's kind of reluctantly like, all right. And they start explaining the rules, and you have no idea what the fuck's going on.
Oh, that's the worst, man. I can't pay attention to that.
But the way that you just described, like the DNC and how that works, how it's like kind of rigged. It's almost like when the guy who's telling you the rules of the game, you start to be like, is this guy bullshitting us? Is he just making up rules on the fly?
Yes.
That's kind of what it's like.
Right. Well, that's what it sounded like they did. They were just like, how about we just not let them in the fucking house, the room? That's all. You guys can't come in.
Yeah.
Because it's a privately owned thing. It's starting to become really... creepy how right a lot of guys were that I heard growing up, like the World Economic Forum, for example, like with Larry Fink, the guy from BlackRock. Like, that's a big club, a billionaires boys club they call it, that you're not allowed inside. We have all the money and we're going to decide what goes on globally speaking for the next 20 years. We're all going to get together and go, you do this, you do that. And George Carlin also had a great way of putting it where he was on some Bill Maher-esque kind of show. And he was explaining how there's, all these under the table handshakes that go on in this country every day and to get things done. And the other guy, the opposition to his argument, was like, there's no giant conspiracy to rig elections. You're being paranoid. And Carlin said, you don't need a formal conspiracy when the people involved have like interests. Like, they don't even have to talk to each other about what they're going to do, because what's good for them is what's good for them. And not good for everybody else. So you don't even need to have a discussion or a meeting for there to be a conspiracy at this point.
I mean, there's a reason, like, all of those, all the comedians who did political kind of topics, basically. I mean, George Carlin, Louis Black, Bill Hicks, Bill Maher. There's a reason they're all kind of like cynical, like, cranky old men.
Sure.
Because, I mean, you do this, you cover it enough, and you start to realize, like, just the freaking skeletons in the closet of how the machine works, and the fact that we're almost powerless to it. And obviously we talked about this earlier, like, it is the best system.
Oh yes.
But it's just like, it's a gigantic enterprise at this point. It's been going on for 300 some years. And it's just like, there's so many things that are just ingrained that you're not going to be able to change. And I think when these comedians delve into it and they make it funny, but it's also just like oh shit, that kind of leaves that sour taste in your mouth. Well, it's like, all right, not much we can do.
Yeah. There used to be something also called the Fairness Act when it came to the media, where they apparently, up until Reagan, there was a clause in the FCC realm of legal, legislation, if that's the right way to say that, but like legal legislation, but like in that whole world of legal terms, there was like the Fairness Act, in that if you're going to cover a topic on the news, a major news media outlet, you have to get the other side of the argument as well. You can't just put one side of the argument forward, because that's biased, obviously. So because then I started thinking about, why is the news so obviously biased depending on what channel you're watching now? Seems like a bunch of bullshit, no? So what happened was, when Reagan became president, he, being an actor, a lot of his donors, a lot of the people contributing to his campaign were Hollywood elite people. And because they knew Reagan, right? They knew old Ronnie, and Ronnie owed them a favor. And those guys said, we don't want the Fairness Act to be a thing anymore. So he had to basically get rid of that whole thing. And that's when the media started doing things like, Ben and J-Lo, and like, you know, violence, just like things that catch eyeballs basically, because it became a business. It wasn't, you know, there used to be guys like, you know, Walter Cronkite, like, what is that guy's name?
Walter
Cronkite.
Yeah.
I knew there was an R in there somewhere, but he was like a very trusted guy. He had integrity. People believed him. They trusted him. Now, you know, people want to, these people get death threats, the anchors of news channels, because they're obviously only talking about one side of an argument, and it's not, so like, you know, it's just crazy that they're pulling the strings. Like they're literally puppets, those people, you know?
Well, Matt Taibbi has a fantastic book on exactly this called Hate Inc.
I've never read Hate Inc.
It's I think I have it here, so I can give it to you. Really,
you've talked about it.
I recommend it to everyone because and I read it during COVID when, you know, the news was very divisive and they're covering on important subjects, but you don't really know the full story. You're getting it from different sides, and they're very distracting. But the message basically that I got from that book was these companies like CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, they are businesses that are trying to make money, right?
Yeah.
And the news just covering good stories or covering it unbiased doesn't really make money or provide shareholder value, as they call it. So, and the way it was the best metaphor for like how it feels to me now when I do turn on CNN or Fox News. He said, these companies are basically the WWE.
Right.
Like the World Wrestling,
it's like, sure,
entertainment, whatever. It's just like Vince McMahon and you know, John Cena and Triple H. They are trying to entertain you with a purposeful storyline and a plot. So like and the commentators may not necessarily be lying to you. I'm sure there are instances where they have just bold-faced lied, right? There's plenty of cases of that, actually. But it's more so they are presenting a certain side of the story that is more entertaining to their audience. And that will attract their audience base and make them angry and make them be like, "What did you see what Tucker Carlson said? Like, did you see what, you know, so and so said? You see what the libs are doing, right?" And it gets people embroiled, and then they want to keep watching it because it's entertainment.
It is entertainment.
It's the same way the WWE, but at least those fans acknowledge, you know, that it is entertainment. The sad news is when you see someone who watches CNN every day and like, no, I tried, you know, they said this, and I've been watching them for years and they've never steered me wrong. It's like, no, you don't realize they're just money making machines, and they're trying to entertain you. And I look at them now with almost like clown noses when I watch them, because I'm just like, this isn't real news. And it's hard to,
they're puppets. They're being told what to say.
And it's hard nowadays to discern what the hell news is good to read. And even anytime you pick up a newspaper, you're like, you kind of have to ask people, like, is this like a right newspaper or a left newspaper? And I never had to ask that before.
Right. And I think the Fairness Act was put in place to avoid this situation where you have to consciously, as an individual, say, I'm going to look into the other side of this argument. It used to be that they covered both sides of the argument because it was a law. You couldn't just go, this is what the Democrats think of this.
I just remembered. I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, but now we have to take it upon ourselves. It's bullshit.
I'm in the Huntington Fire Department. We just had two like kind of rescue things, and I won't get into the details just because it's public, but they got covered in the news. These two rescues that we did. One was like a wildlife rescue. One was a car accident.
Were you there and they wrote about it? And it was...
I wasn't there. I wasn't on either of these scenes, but obviously we have like a group chat with all the firefighters, and we're posting the links to like the Twitter articles and, you know, the local. This is just local news. It's not national. The local news got like 4 facts totally wrong.
Completely wrong.
Just they referenced the wrong fire department. They said the guy, they said the driver fled the scene even though he was there. Like
sure.
My friends witnessed it with their own eyes. They took him out of the vehicle. They're like, what? So that just made me think. I'm like, these are just 2 like local news organizations who they really only need to get like 5 details correct because it's like a 2-paragraph story.
Right.
And no one's really reading it. I'm like, the fact that they got like 3 facts wrong just like made me so disheartened, because I'm like, if they're getting that wrong, what the hell are people getting wrong on a national or global scale?
Exactly. And imagine with an incentive for, you know, money and like, you know, it come out, those, I think the difference is these people might just be not good at, you know, being journalists, whereas the major news outlets they know what they're doing and they don't give a shit.
Well, that's the thing.
You know?
I mean, you used to assume. You used to assume when you picked up the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, you're like, this journalist who wrote this article has been vetted. I'm sure they have a rich history.
Dude, a philosopher used to write for the New York Times, a modern day philosopher, like people who thought and had truly like intellectually profound opinions on social issues. Like now it's just like a hit piece every fucking time.
Well, the danger in the same way that a lot of these, news media conglomerates like CNN and Fox News have gone is a lot of these newspapers that used to be unbiased, the Washington Post, what was it, Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward, like some of the best like Pulitzer Prize winning journalism. Now it's gone a little bit of the same way. Not as bad as the media or the news media, but Wall Street Journal, New York Times, like you start to hire kind of the same person over and over again, right? Because you've produced this reputation of being this certain type of newspaper that delivers a certain type of news, and as you start making more money from doing it a certain way, you're just like, oh, I'm just going to hire carbon copies who do the same thing, right? And I don't know if this is the truth, or I assume this mostly, because you start to see a clear slant. And also, I'm sure a lot of these resumes are coming out of the same Ivy League schools and same backgrounds, and they probably have the same internships. So there's not much diversity of thought going on within that. Whereas where I love Substack and stuff is you're getting all of these people who aren't afraid and they're not beholden to a major corporation to say something a little bit controversial and something that might piss people off, but they've done the research and they're like, you know what? I'm going to go out on a limb and I've done my research, and like this is a contentious thing, but I don't have a boss telling me not to publish this because of the sponsors, Right. So that's why I think the Free Press by Barry Weinstein is really good, and a lot of Matt Taibbi, the guy I referenced who wrote Hate Inc., is on Substack. A lot of these Substack.
There's also a book called The Unfreedom of the Press. I forgot the name of the author. I'll write it in the show notes, but in this book, this guy just starts off with, he's like, okay, this guy from this news outlet and this guy from this news outlet and this politician. You ever notice how they all have the same last name? And you're like, that's like the first sentence, and you're like, oh my God, yeah. And then dude, you start to realize like they're all related. Politicians, news anchors, CEOs of news corporations, they're sitting at Thanksgiving dinner together, some of these people.
Well, I mean, look at the Cuomo brothers.
The Cuomo brothers is a great example. Dude, remember during COVID when Cuomo was getting a little heat and they just had his own brother like grill him about it?
Yeah.
Like, what do you think he's gonna make his brother look like an asshole?
And
no.
You know what? That was when and even me, who knows all of this stuff, I'm watching it because I'm like, oh, this will be entertaining. Two brothers going at it on the news.
Yeah, maybe because like you have a brother, like you guys give each other shit.
And part of me was like, oh, this is funny, and I'm watching this, and then the other part of me was like, wait, what the fuck? This is a clear conflict of interest.
Right.
Like you can't
what used to get me too? Remember when like this started to happen with opinion? Donald Trump is a Nazi, and I'm like, it's just like. It's not even about you saying Donald Trump is a Nazi. It's not that. It's just that you're a news organization. Why do you have an opinion? Shouldn't you just be reporting what happened and what the facts are?
Yeah, well,
what's with the opinions? All of a sudden?
The opinion section used to be a little sliver column, right? And I like reading the opinions because that's where you get to see either a reader or an outside source just offer something that's totally unique or different. Usually,
this is just an.
But now, if you go to New York Times, like the opinion section is actually like front and center. It's on the right side, but there's like 10 opinion articles right when you go to the homepage,
and they're all controversial,
clickbaity titles.
And half the time you click them, and the story literally has nothing to even do with the title. In a way, they'll mention it like in passing in a paragraph, but the rest of the story is not even about that. It just got you to it's clickbait.
You know what my favorite thing, and I don't know if every newspaper does this, but Newsday, it's the Long Island newspaper, they do a section in the middle of it's on Sunday, they'll do a section in the middle that is readers like email submission reaction to the biggest articles of that week.
That's interesting.
So you'll get like, let's say the biggest article of the week was, some politician was in a scandal. And then when you flip over to the middle that Sunday, it'll be 5 different reader opinions on either the article itself or the coverage of it. So you'll get people who are like that coverage and this journalist did a great job, blah, blah, and then you get another person like this was clearly slanted.
Right.
This is bullshit. I was there and I knew who this happened. And then you get another person. I was an employee of that politician, and like that to me is more news than the actual article itself. And that's why I have a lot of faith in crowdsourcing, which is why sites like Reddit that get a bad rap, or Twitter even, And there are reasons, obviously, not to trust those, but you have to do kind of your own vetting in a sense. But I almost prefer hearing from multiple public sources, and you get obviously people who are crazy, you get people who are reasonable,
right,
and then you get everything in between. But you start to form your own judgment of what happened based on
all of the assessments.
Yeah, which is why I'm a big fan of crowdsourcing.
I agree.
It's like Wikipedia almost. Like, yeah, you're going to get some shit wrong, and you're going to get people fucking around every now and then. But generally, it points to the right information.
Right.
You start to get a clear picture of things.
Also, going back to, because this all just comes back to this Fairness Act thing. Like, again, this was put in place so that we didn't have to do all this extra work as people who just consume news. Like, there was always the other side of the argument. And like, it's just interesting that in the 80s, there was that whole, giant, like we've talked about mass hysteria on this show. There was this giant hysteria about these underground satanic tunnels. Did you ever hear about this? That in the 80s, there was this big fear.
Was that in relation to the Son of Sam?
I don't think so.
Oh.
I think this was just an elementary school rumor that got out of control, and like people were truly genuinely concerned that during school hours teachers were taking their kids underground through tunnels to go do like satanic rituals, and it was this completely absolutely not true thing, and it got a lot of news attention though. So between Ronald Reagan and the Hollywood guys that he owed a favor to, the Christian radio stations at the time didn't want to have to also put forth the atheistic take on a situation because of the Fairness Act. So they got on board too. And like, there's a Bible Belt in this country. So there was a lot of push for like, we just want to talk about Jesus and God. The country needs it right now. There's this giant hysteria about satanic rituals going on at schools. So between that and the other thing, they just got rid of it. And ever since then, it's just been WWE for the news. Like, it's just interesting to know that it wasn't always like that. And people always go, like the country used to be so, politics didn't used to be so divisive. What happened? I think that's what happened.
Yeah.
Because ever since, this was in 88, I think, or 80, I forget which, whatever. It was in the 80s, late 80s. And, if you can imagine, it takes like a few years to get rolling. And ever since then, dude, it's just been a very divisive, like people who disagree with you, you want to kill them kind of vibe. I mean, we don't, because we have the thought to kind of dig deeper into issues, but the average person doesn't have time and doesn't give a shit, honestly, enough to dig into the other side of the argument. So, yeah, we need something like that back, no?
Yeah, I agree. I don't know what the right answer is, but I know, like,
now everything's already bought and sold. It's like, how can you even, right?
There's a lot of volatile opinions on like Elon Musk buying Twitter, and buying X. Sorry, I don't know enough about. I haven't done my research necessarily to know what the pros and cons are. But in my world, the advertising world, a lot of advertisers are pulling budget off of X because of his ownership and things that he said in the past. But I mean, in my opinion, and this could not age well for whatever unfolds in the next 5 years, but in my opinion, it's a very valuable thing that he's trying to do at X.
Yeah, because it's like a Fairness Act kind of thing.
Because he's not just going to like unwieldly let hate speech and all this shit just go crazy. I think he's just loosening the reins of what Twitter had in place, which was like literally letting the government dictate whose accounts they deleted.
Which is the cat's out of the bag. They
unconstitutional thing in the world.
They did that,
Yeah.
I mean, they really did.
Yeah, and I know, like, I think the people are trying to sue the government for that because, I mean, that's just pretty clear textbook violation of the Constitution. But I mean, it could go bad ways, and I think that's always the argument about free speech and letting it just go unadulterated, because there is that messy period where bad shit, glass is gonna get broken, shit's gonna get weird, but in the long run you get more transparency into how things happen.
Dude, you
right?
need
I mean, look, the first thing Elon Musk did when he bought Twitter, he released the emails between the government and Twitter employees. Like, that transparency is so important because now the public can get they can kind of make their own judgment on all right, is that right or wrong?
Right.
And like, they let the evidence sort of do the work, where you don't necessarily need a journalist to cover that. It's just like, all right, form your own judgment on that. What do you think?
Exactly. Yeah, and now that's it's caused so much it's caused so much issues because there's all those people like, are you a journalist? Do you know how to report on things? Like, and it's like, first of all, like I've said 100 times already on this episode, you didn't used to have to do that, but now you don't have a choice, and it's up to you now. So like you can't just hear what you hear through the TV and just accept it. You know, you have to understand that, first of all, you used to hear the other side of the argument, and there is always another side to any argument. So you have to investigate for yourself these days, which, you know, sucks, but at least we all have computers in our pockets. You can do that. And to your point, though, about, you know, what you were just saying about Twitter, you need free speech because, and the liberals should understand that as much as a Nazi should understand that, because it's like you're telling a kid to just shut their mouth and don't talk about what happened to them today. Or because when a kid opens its mouth, even though it doesn't really know what it's saying, it's very stumbly with its words, they might tell you like, my teacher hit me today or something. And you go, huh? Like, people need to be able to talk, and they shouldn't be afraid to talk.
That's actually that's a good analogy.
You know what I mean? Like, you can't just, because things that are going on that you otherwise would not know about, like, you get to know about them now. Free speech, I mean, you're muzzling the collective voice of our species at that point, even if it's just one person or one side of the, you know, of a political issue. It's like, you know, this country has always been about progression, getting to the next thing, right? Like, we're always trying to make room for someone at the table who doesn't have a seat. That's what we do in this country ever since the beginning. Ever since the beginning, people always go, you know, black people weren't included in the Constitution. They were only 1/3 of a person. And it's like, look, the forefathers understood that this is going to take a long time. You can't just snap your fingers and everybody accepts black people as, you know, just as equal as everybody else. Like, it was a different time. And the fact that they had the foresight to know eventually things will get to a better place, that's what makes this country different than anywhere else. Everywhere else, they just go, fuck you, you're not allowed. Right. You can't sit here. Done. Or you're in jail because you're gay or whatever it is. And that's why I'm thinking these days about, like, the trans issues and all that stuff with sports and stuff. It's very complicated stuff, right? And I fear that, like, one day, 50 years from now, there will be a mentality about the backlash to all of that. Like, can you imagine they never used to let trans women compete with other, you know, women? Like, can you imagine that? But I think the point is that no matter how complicated the issue is, which this issue is extremely complicated, it's America's job to figure out how we're going to make it work. Right. We're going to find a seat.
That's a good point.
You know what I mean?
And yeah, it sometimes it bothers me because it seems like when I say we, I mean like the collective we of the public, and just like you go to a barbecue, I feel like the trans topic just always comes up.
It always comes up.
And I'm like,
because it's a real, and let me just say something. I think that's because, yes, the news pushes it because it's a divisive issue, but also it's really happening. Yeah. I went to a wedding the other day. There were trans people at the wedding. Like, people are trans. It's like people being like, you know, like back in the day, people would be like, you know, about gay people, same thing. It's like, dude, these people exist and they're very different and they're intricate, and they're, you know, it depends on, you know, the person. Everybody's different. But in this country, we try to make it work for everybody. Go ahead. What were you saying?
No, yeah. I mean, I think you nailed the point of we try to make it work for everyone. And I think
it just takes time.
While it bothers people, and yeah, you know, 60 years ago, gay people bothered people too. Right. But I think you're right. The reason we talk about it so much is because that's almost it's that collective, you know, us trying to figure it out.
We're trying to figure it out.
We're like, is this morally wrong? Is this scientifically wrong? Is this just wrong just because of my beliefs? Right. Like, what do we do? Like, how do we figure this out? And I think it's really cool when you take a step back and look at it from a broader view of like, what are the conversations we're having now going to look like in 15, 20, 25 years?
Exactly.
And sometimes I may have talked about this with you on this podcast before, but one thing I like to think of, or frame that I like to judge certain decisions on when it comes to these strange issues, whether morally or politically, is what would me 10 years ago have thought about this, and what would me 10 years from now think about this? And obviously you'll never know what 10 years from now you'll think about it, but you kind of can see, like you said, this country's always trying to progress.
That's the
so
point.
We're always trying to get better, and it's messy because it's this kind of delicate dance between chaos on the outside and order on the inside.
Yes.
But you need that kind of tension back and forth all the time, and it might take 10 years.
Right.
You eventually kind of figure out a decent enough solution. Yeah. And that's why I think of looking at 10 years from now. I think 10 years from now, the people who may have had certain hardline opinions on trans will have probably changed their minds.
I agree.
So I don't know how those people are going to get there, myself included, but I know it's probably going to trend that way.
Yeah.
So I like to keep that open mind of, all right, maybe I don't agree with this now, or I think it's weird, or I have certain hard opinions on it. I'm going to hold those loosely because I know in 10 years or in 20 years, I'm not going to want to have to do an awkward flip-flop. I'd rather just say, you know what, I was always a little bit open to this idea, and maybe I had some opinions about it, and I was willing to speak those, but I don't hold them hard enough that I'm going to be a bitter old man who still hates
You have
people.
to remain open-minded. You know, we talked about the immortality key last episode, and you know that got me looking back into the great thinkers, Plato, Socrates, those two guys only. But yeah, specifically them.
Aristotle,
absolutely.
The trio.
I just meant those are the only two guys I looked into because Socrates was Plato's teacher, and Socrates didn't write anything down, but Plato sure as shit did. So I was, he has his famous The Republic rather, and in that book he talks about issues at that time in the voice of Socrates because he knew him better than anybody. But Plato has a very interesting, I guess, metaphorical story that he's come up with called the allegory of the cave.
Oh, yeah.
You know it. Everyone knows it. We learned about it in high school.
I took Philosophy 101 in college.
Dude, exactly.
You
learn about it in school, and it's literally this in the sense of like the story talks about prisoners that are in a cave, and they've been there their whole lives, and they're chained to a wall, and their motion is restricted, and they're staring at a wall, and behind them is a very kind of dim flame that lights up the cave just a little bit. And every once in a while, a guard will come by and put a shape in front of the fire so it makes a shape on the wall. And the prisoners over time got to know these shapes, and they gave them names, and they made up stories about them, and because it's all they ever knew, right? One day, one of the prisoners' shackles gets them undone somehow, and he escapes the cave. First thing that happens, he walks out of the cave, and the sunlight blinds him almost because it's so bright, overwhelming. But eventually he gets used to it. Starts walking around, he starts seeing shapes like the shapes he knew in the cave, but it's a real bird now, or a real dog, or whatever. And he's realizing, he's having this revelation of like all these other things that can also exist. And he can't believe it. And, he's all excited, and he's enlightened and fulfilled with it. And he goes, I got to go back to the prison and the cave and tell the prisoners about this revelation. He gets down there. It's so dark though, and it disorients him. And the shadows that used to be familiar to him, he can no longer discern on the wall. So to the people in the cave, he seems like he doesn't know anything. And he's all discombobulated, and they're like, why would we trust you? You don't even know about these shapes. Like, why would we listen to you? When in reality, he just knows so much more now from escaping this little cave of thought and experience. And the moral is, most people take solace in their ignorance, and they'll even be hostile towards those who threaten that, right? And like, that's what's going on now in a way with the trans issues, with the progressive issues in general. It's always been that way. These people who are in the cave and just make fun of anybody else who says anything than what's going on obviously right in front of them on the wall. They're not open-minded enough. You have to remain open-minded to these things because, well, that's basically the end of it. But with the issue on trans people in sports, the very fact that we have women's sports and men's sports, that was never a thing a few decades ago. There was no women's sports. It was just men play sports. Right. The fact that we have women's sports shows that we eventually find a way to make everybody happy. Right. So eventually there's going to be and I'm not saying that there should be a separate, whole league or organization for trans sports. I'm not saying that either. I don't know what the solution is yet, but we're going to figure it out, It's like that famous woman, I forgot her name, who was running the Boston Marathon, and she was getting like tackled and thrown to the ground because women weren't allowed to run the Boston Marathon at the time. Now,
now you get like paraplegics running the marathon.
Exactly. The Special Olympics, we figure out a seat. Everyone gets a seat.
It's beautiful.
It is. It's cool. That's why you can't hate this place. But also, the left always has to kind of hate this place because they have to have a problem with it.
And we need that.
And we need that.
And we need, there's another allegory of...
The eagle?
No, it's the fence. You heard about this?
No.
It's about, the right and the left, basically. So Imagine you're walking in a field, a wide open field, you know, nothing there, it's unexplored, no one owns the property, and you stumble upon a fence. And the person on, you know,
there, I can see it.
The person who's a Democrat on the left says, I think we should tear down this fence. We don't know who put this here. You know, they're probably dead. We don't know what's going on. I think we just tear down the fence and keep going and see what else is on there. The Republican or the person on the right comes and says, well, maybe there's a reason there's a fence here, right? So maybe let's leave it there until we know exactly what happens. And it's a beautiful metaphor because it's like, yeah, they're both right.
Yes.
They're both right, you know, but there's just two very different approaches to things. One is kind of more like, let's change things, let's innovate, let's keep going, let's progress. And you need that. And then you also need the kind of the older brother. I like to think of Republicans as almost like the older brother that's like no fun, but like they're like, well, hold on, let's be smart about this, or let's be rational. Yeah. You know, let's go back to our roots here and like let's really, you know, just think through this. And that's a pain in the ass sometimes too, but it's like a older and little brother, and they're constantly just
well, that's the romantic dance of America, right? I mean, that's the waltz of it. In every other country, that's what they're missing. You know, they're missing that.
But you know what the problem is?
Wonderful formula.
And you just touched on this, which is you need to be open-minded. The shame to me is that the people who are the most open-minded almost don't have enough strong opinions that they vote either hard right or hard left because they don't like either candidate because they're so open-minded. They're like, well, I don't like...
Well, there's nihilists, there's anarchists, right?
And they're like, I don't like either side. And it's a shame because like that could potentially be the smartest, most rational group amongst... That could be the 80%, and then you're only getting 20%, and then 10's voting red, 10's voting blue, and then the other 80% is kind of left being like, well, I'm open-minded enough that I think the guy on the right is too extreme and the guy on the left is too extreme. So can we get something for us in here? I think that's the shame, is you're really never going to get someone who is extremely open-minded, because what gets votes and what gets people stirred up is kind of like these strong-held, you know, policies or beliefs that get people going. You're not going to get someone to go, well, let's, you know, maybe tear half the fence and you know, leave the other and
well, that's the thing. Social change, it happens in social settings. Like, you know, the president is kind of a dumb job in that sense. Like, he can't really do anything actually with regards to changing. And you know, I think that I really believe that if there ever was a conspiracy, I believe that the forefathers made one when they made the rules of the Constitution, in that, like, it's like the illusion of freedom Ben Franklin always talked about, giving people the illusion of freedom. And I don't think he meant that as like we're all slaves, realistically speaking. I think that he meant you got to give them a vote every 4 years. You got to give them, you know, departments to work in politically. You got to give them this idea that we're pushing towards this right versus left kind of narrative, and like we're going to figure out which one's best at the time. But realistically, social change takes decades, not 4 years. You know, and like that's why presidents go in and they never really get anything done that they wanted to. They just kind of make a small little inch turn that way. And then we eventually, over the course of the years, find our way to wherever we were going to get. You know,
what do you think is like the quickest social change that we've seen in our lifetime? Because the fact that we have social media and smartphones and we have so much transparency that our parents' generation or the generation before us didn't have at all. So I feel like social change, and where a lot of the divisiveness is also coming from, is the fact that social change is happening so much quicker than it used to.
Yeah, it's sped up.
And maybe it's not happening quicker, but it feels like the pressure to do it is, because you're getting inundated with social media. And I think that's more what drives a lot of this divisiveness. It's because you're getting the older generation that's like, whoa, like this takes
Well, I'll be honest with you, man.
Years.
I saw a man to answer your question, I saw a man the other day in a suit just rolling a blunt on a fucking bench in New York City. And I'm like, man, that just 2 years ago. That was, no, not 3 years ago. That was like, just look at this fucking guy. He doesn't give a fuck.
I had someone, I was sitting outside.
But dude, I mean, it's totally okay. You know?
I had someone I was sitting outside at a bar, and the lady was like, oh, do you mind if I like spark up out here? And we were like, I mean, one, you're not going to say no.
Of course not. we both indulge.
I mean, the smell of it, I will say, can get annoying. I mean,
well, some of this shit is skunk now.
Yeah,
like it smells bad.
I mean, there are
almost.
some places in the city where you're like, all right, this is a bit obnoxious.
Yeah.
You know, but
that's what I mean. Like this woman was literally, I mean, this guy was literally in like Zuccotti Park, which is like, you know, there's kids around and all this shit, and people are eating lunch, and this guy's just got a fatty, and he's got like a briefcase.
Yeah,
like that is so crazy that's totally normal now.
I'll actually say the opposite. The surprising one of social change in the other way was cigarettes in our lifetime.
Oh, you can't smoke no
like
more.
when we were
you can't smoke
probably
cigarettes.
when we were under the age of 10, so still in the 90s, like smoking was pretty rampant.
Absolutely.
Like, I mean, I remember going to Applebee's and there was a smoking and non-smoking section. I don't really remember being on flights young enough.
I don't remember that either.
But apparently when I was a kid, there was smoking sections.
Yeah.
But that, I mean, in 20 years, like,
you can't.
I don't know anyone who
Can you imagine if you
cigarettes.
started smoking right now? Like people would go, what are you doing, you fucking idiot?
What's interesting is the tobacco companies are still figuring out ways to, you know, e-cigarettes and the nicotine pouches, and they just know.
Yeah.
And these kids get hooked, man.
Yeah,
like,
man.
Some of my friends,
I just had another reprisal
Juul.
of my addiction to vaping.
Really?
Because
Yeah.
it was just on the table at work, the break table. It was like a communal vape, and I haven't done this in years, and I swear to God, I was like about to buy one, and I was like, yo, I can't let this happen.
It's scary. I had like
the
a little
nicotine hit.
Oh, it's so
potent and quick.
One of the quickest lessons in how addictive something can be.
Really,
because
man.
I got on the Zyn train for a little bit as well.
Dude, my coworker, dude,
which I thought was gross.
All day.
I thought it was gross because I equated it to like skull, like dipping, like gross.
That's how I think
leaf
of it.
and whatever. But nicotine is like these little, you know, pouches, and it's just nicotine. It's not tobacco.
Yeah.
And you get that, and you get a nice little head rush for like 15, 20 minutes.
Sure.
And I was like, you're more focused, you talk better, and I was like, oh, this is nice. And then, you know, I buy my own tin, and then you know that leads to like buying another one the next week, and then all of a sudden
and they
I was
taste
like
vanilla, right? They're very.
You can get any
they
flavor
taste
you
good.
want.
Yeah.
And like after like a month, I'm like, wait, I've done this every day for a month, and I didn't even want to.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I want to stop, and then the first day, you know, I'm craving it, and I'm like, shit, like this is so addicting, and I didn't even intend to do it. It's crazy.
I think another social change that happened rapidly, like. And it's not so specific as, you know, vaping or smoking weed or anything like that, but it's this mentality towards mental health and being honest about your emotions. I mean,
where was this subject change?
No, I'm saying this is another social, you know, progression that happened that out of nowhere.
I forgot.
It's just totally okay to be 100% vulnerable and cry in front of like a bunch of men, and they'll just give you a group hug and not make fun of you, maybe behind your back, but that's normal. People make fun of you behind your back.
And I think that overall, that trend has definitely made mostly positive.
100%.
Right? You get athletes kind of talking about their mental health, and like you see some of these documentaries, man, of like what professional athletes or musicians go through, and you get a peek behind the curtain of like one little criticism from a fan.
Oh, dude.
It can just be so mean and just ruin your year. Like, and you start to feel for these athletes where you used to be like, oh, boo-hoo, you're getting paid millions of dollars.
Right.
And then you see kind of like their actual experience, and you hear about it, and they talk about it, and you're like, oh shit, that's actually very legitimate. And I could not imagine that pressure of like being in public and just having people criticize me and like call me names and throw shit at me, and, you know, say I'm making too much money. Like, can you imagine like just walking to work through your lobby and people just like yelling at you?
I think that's what
day.
You're actually hitting on. Like what I'm trying to pinpoint here is this awareness that no matter who you are, you're just a person.
Yeah.
Like the Pope, you know, there's that kid's book, Everybody Poops. I don't know if you've ever read that book.
Sure have.
But the Pope, Beyonce, Derek Jeter, you, everybody takes a shit. Everybody. And that mentality has kind of like, and that's a very funny way of putting it, but like that's a new social progression that like you know, men don't cry. You don't cry. Like, but now I'll cry right now. I don't give a fuck.
Even think about the couple episodes ago, me talking about going to therapy.
Yeah.
Like 10 years ago.
That's
10 years ago.
One.
Not only would I never have even
people would go, what are you, crazy?
Yeah, exactly. And also, you know, it's another one too, is even just like doing things that like in the 90s or when we were kids were either called like feminine or just like you called them gay.
Yeah.
Right? Like
gay's making a reprise,
like
by
when
the way,
when I was in high school, I started going to yoga, and I didn't tell anyone.
Oh, dude.
Because I was like embarrassed.
I would have made fun of you.
Yeah. I was like, you know what? I was like, I want to tell people about this because I feel great. Like I'm stretching, my body feels so strong.
Right.
Like it's so it has some of that weird culture incorporated with it, but I wanted to tell people, and I was like, I can't, because I'm a man and I'm a football player, and like I'm supposed to be a weightlifter, and like
exactly,
I can't tell people. And now, like dads and uncles who used to smoke cigarettes are now like, I'm doing yoga, and I'm like, what?
Yeah, I'm like Buddhist now. Like people talk about that. Like, yeah, I mean, what was I just gonna say? You just triggered this memory of mine of oh yeah, like being queer, for example. Like that used to be an insult. Yeah. And now there's queer studies departments at universities.
Yeah.
Like that used to be a bad thing to call somebody, and that just flipped on a dime. Like being queer is, I don't really know what it is, but like I think that's the point, right? Yeah. Like you can just be confused, and it's okay.
Yeah, and I think with most of these social movements, when you say it takes like 10 years to change, what you typically see is it takes like 6 years, and it goes a little too far.
Yeah.
It go, like if here's where it should stop, it goes like, 10, 20% more. Yeah. And then people get like, yo, you got to chill with that, right? Stop,
and then it settles into the,
stop talking about your trauma, and I think that is when you start to see it takes another 3 to 4 years for that to rebound back to center.
It's like when fitness podcasts blew up and everybody was talking about their gut biome ratio. And I'm like, okay,
you're optimizing hacks.
What is everybody, a biologist now? Or like, it's a little crazy.
I mean, I see it too. I used to be a huge like morning routine guy. I promote like,
and that's fine.
But even that, it's just like, all right, now it's gotten too far.
It's just like Stacey's telling me about her blood work, and I'm like, hey, listen, just go for a run and easy on the bread. That's all, And
even like eating salad, like
that was never a thing.
Like with a group of guys, you go out to like lunch, and like one guy orders a salad. Like, what are you, fucking gay? Like, are you kidding me? Like, yeah, literally. And like, even, I mean, there are some groups of guys that still would probably make fun of me for getting a salad. But now I'm like, well, you're the idiot who's eating a fucking fried foods and vegetable oils. And now I seem woke for saying that.
It's cool to have high cholesterol. Like that's cool. Yeah. It's that's interesting, man. I don't know, but all I know, and this is our point, we're headed in the right direction, I think. Yeah. Collectively, we always get where we should be going.
It's a beautiful way to look at it, because you can get so riled up, and you see some people who are just like so politically, just like, they're obsessed with, and like all they want to talk about is these like hot button issues, and they get so angry about these social issues. But when you look at it with that view of like, you know what, we're progressing in the right way.
Right. We're all in the same boat.
We'll figure it out.
We're going to get there.
Figure it out.
We're going to get there.
It might be a little messy along the way. It's definitely going to be messy
Absolutely.
along the way.
And that's the thing. Like, let's be real here. With every one of these issues, there's, there's people that the right will talk about that guy who won all those gold, not the guy, I forgot it.
Leah Thomas,
the girl, excuse me. However she wants to be addressed. See, we're still getting there here. But some people think that person took advantage of the sport of the game or whatever at that time, or there's instances like that, like where someone is fearful that someone's just taking advantage of something, and I'm like, I see what you're trying to say, I really do see, but I really believe that this is necessary, these kinds of scenarios, because how else will the discussion get brought up? How else will it make news headlines and news stories? It's got to be some kind of a controversial thing to get the discussion going. And I don't think that's just going to be the end-all be-all of this if the left or whatever gets their way, that just women will never be able to compete ever again in sports. Like, that's definitely not the solution. That's definitely not the solution everyone's going to agree to in the long term. We just got to stay calm, talk about it. We'll figure it out. Maybe that means something like, when did you transition? Before puberty or after? What kind of drugs did you take? What's your weight, like class, like what, like all those things could be taken into consideration because things move so quickly now, information, whatever, data analysis, 4D, shit like that. Like, look, all I'm saying is we'll find a way for this person to sit at the table.
I was just talking about this past weekend about this kind of the way it figures itself out and trends go a little too far, and then they self-correct. You see it a bit in music genres, like over decades, right? So I was just talking to someone about this, how, in the 80s, it was a lot of like hair metal, glam rock, like Pour Some Sugar on Me, these cheesy, rock bands, and like these songs that didn't make any fucking sense. And then 1991, Nirvana. that's a self-correction right
That's
there.
a self-correction,
right? That is like
exactly.
just kick in the gut of that type of genre to this is grunge. We don't give a shit. Like no
I'll tell you
fancy stuff.
exactly how I feel, for real.
Yeah.
You
and
know?
like people all of a sudden fucking loved it because they were like, thank God, not another pour some sugar on me fucking stupid song. Now we're getting something real and
Raw.
like this
Honest.
connects. And
Did you
you're
ever-
seeing oh sorry.
Go ahead. No, I'm sorry. I interrupted you. Please.
You're seeing it now with country music in a lot of ways.
Yeah, dude.
How, for fucking 10 years, and I have friends who still hate country, and I get it because you're getting those like beer can on a truck and a blue jeans and a cold beer club, and you get these stupid fucking songs. And yeah, like it's going to alienate people from country music. Now you're seeing these
Oliver
guys,
Anthony, Coulter Wall,
Zach Bryan, like all these Tyler Childers, like all these guys coming up who are just raw, like talking about their
It's
feelings.
insane that
and
Oliver Anthony's album is literally his phone recordings.
Yeah.
Like,
and Zach Bryan too. Like he got famous on Twitter. He posted videos on Twitter, and like if you listen to his songs on Spotify, like they're pretty low budget recordings, but like it's the raw. He's talking about something real, and like he's writing poems. He's not writing about freaking a country girl and Daisy Dukes, and it's like people are finally like, it's self-corrected. Like, thank God.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm sure that genre of Zach Bryan will get played out over the next 7 years, and people get sick of that, and then something else will come up,
100%, man. We'll always figure it out, dude. Yeah. Should we talk about a book?
Yeah.
What'd you read this since last time we
read,
hung out?
I don't even know if I want to talk about it because it was so fucking sad, but I read a book called 102 Minutes on 9/11.
Oh, yeah. Real quick. Oh, man, I think it was at the wedding. Someone saw that post and they went, someone reading that book? And I said, yeah, they go, that is brutal. A brutal read.
It was an important thing to read. So one of the guys at the fire department, this guy Scott, he's a huge reader, and he has a library like this in the fire department.
Oh, that's awesome.
And he found my TikTok or Instagram. He's like, oh, I didn't know you were a huge reader. He was like, come here, I got to show you the library. So he brings me up and he gives me all these. Great. He gives me like 5 books about war and firefighting and 9/11 and all this stuff. And then I gave him books in kind. And I read that. And he's like, because it was 9/11. It was that was what, 2 weeks ago.
Right.
So I was like, you know what? Let me read this. It's the 22nd anniversary. So I read that book, and it's really well written, but it's fucking sad as hell because it's written from the reporters interviewed survivors. So people who collectively were in the buildings and were able to get out through some way, and like he connected all these people who hadn't seen each other in probably 18 years or whatever, and then they get together and start piecing together the story. He also talks about a lot of the communications failures and ways that things could have gone better, which is kind of unfortunate, but it is another side of the story, right? You only hear these stories about how everyone's a hero, and honestly most of the stories you hear is about the firefighters and the NYPD being here and the Port Authority. You don't really hear about the office workers and the civilians who those were fucking heroes as well, and they don't get enough credit, and this book really talks about a lot of that. And you also hear,
why is it called 102 minutes?
That's how long between the first tower hitting and the North Tower being hit and the North Tower falling.
Do you have any quick is there a story, a quick one or whatever that just stood out to you? Some person that did something for somebody else, or like what are these stories like?
It's not so much just like, oh, I have a really crazy story for you. It's just a different point of view where you forget that you think of it from the perspective of where we were, right? You saw it on TV. Everyone knew what was happening, kind of. The people inside the building had no idea what was happening, right? And you're coming in the wake of the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center, which is a car bomb. So a lot of the people who were in the World Trade Center on 9/11
were also there.
Were also there during 1993. So they assumed it was just like another bomb like that. So some people who were in the building in 1993 knew, okay, let's evacuate immediately, because last time it was a pain in the ass getting down the stairs and the elevators and stuff. So when they heard a bomb or an explosion, they were just like, let's get out immediately. Other people, like were in the elevators, thought just like the elevators broke.
Oh,
right? So like the perspective change is really different.
Yeah,
but then you get the people in the South Tower. So the North Tower was hit first. People in the South Tower, they see it. Some people see it. Some people don't know it's a plane. Some people think it's an accident. So some people are freaking out and just like, I'm going to evacuate immediately. Other people are just like, well, we're fine here.
Yeah, yeah.
And there was even an announcement in the South Tower, like, no need to evacuate, go back to your desks. And like that, when you hear those sorts of things, because you get it, right? Like, I remember seeing it and being like, oh, well, the towers aren't going to collapse.
Yeah, they'll put the fire out.
So like the firefighters get up there and people will get down, and obviously people died, but like the rest will kind of, and you see the innocence of these people who just like didn't think what the worst possible thing could happen. And then how quickly, 102 minutes, how quickly that happened, right? You would have figured, and as a firefighter, I know a lot of these building codes are meant to be, fireproof for 3 to 4 hours. So a lot of the firefighters went in assuming like, okay, we have 3 to 4 hours here, and how quickly it just, and the book also talks about the failures of the building codes and the construction of the towers in 1970 or so. They changed the building codes, that they kind of cheated, or they didn't have enough stairwells. There's only 3 stairwells in each tower. And when the planes hit, 2 of them got knocked out.
Of course.
The Empire State Building, which was built 40 years earlier, has 8 stairwells. So you just like, you learn about a lot of the ins and outs, and I don't want to tell any particular stories because it's just too sad. But
yeah, of course. I watched this year for the anniversary. I always watch something, right? And like, what I watched this year was the CBS, I believe that was the channel, broadcast from that morning. They have the original broadcast before and during. So before, there was a guy who wrote a book on Howard Hughes, was just on the news that morning talking about his new book. And it's such an innocent, suits were just a little fluffier back then, weren't they? And ties were fun and whatever. And in the middle of, it's so eerie because this is like the true recording of that news broadcast that day live. And the guy's talking about his book, and there's no like, we have to cut to whatever. It's just towers on fire. And it's like, the person goes, we have breaking news. There must have been some kind of an explosion down at the World Trade Center in Manhattan. This happened minutes ago. And, oh, God, Tony Aruga or something, some guy from Staten Island is on the phone, and he just called the news station. And he's like, oh, my God, I was just taking out the trash. The big plane, you should have seen it. Boom, boom, it was huge. Oh, my goodness, all those poor people up there, like this Italian old guy. And he's like in lore now, 9/11 lore, because he was the first like eyewitness who called. And you just see as the story goes on, like, I can't believe the newscasters kept their cool, because then the second plane hits live on TV.
That was wild.
And they have to just kind of go, yes, that happened, and we're getting word now that there's a terrorist attack on New York City, and we'll be back in a moment with more information. We're going to cut to another. And I'm like, dude, the world's just, you just watch the world change over the course of the broadcast. And it's, and as you get older too, man, you just start to realize that those people, like you read about in the book, they're just going to work and whatever. I know that's a cliche thing to say, but the world just changed that day, man. And it just won't ever be the same. I mean, ever is a big word, but like,
it won't. No, it's true.
It's just really,
at least in this country, it was particularly in New York where we grew up, like seeing it, like it's never going to be the same.
No, of course not. No. And just watching the live because it was so innocent TV, and and you're right. Even the fact that they kept that like news anchor voice, they kept their right, and like we're waiting to hear word. And but a couple of times on different broadcasts, you did see. Some people like let out emotion. Well, in the background, you can hear people going, "Oh my God!" Really getting upset, and the casters are just doing their job and keeping a professional tone. And God, man, what a day!
Yeah, I mean, I
was in fifth grade.
I hesitate to recommend it, but I do always recommend on 9/11 or even whenever. But like reading up on it or watching to just remind yourself of the perspective of that before and after, and how lives just changed so drastically. And I mean, that book was rough, but I'm sure there's I think there's rougher books out there. My buddy was telling me about another book called like something One Plane in the Sky or something like that, and the audio book won like a Pulitzer.
Oh, really?
Because it's the audio recordings from that day of everyone. Yeah. And I'm like, why would you do that to yourself?
Yeah,
like,
dude.
It's like
the audio recordings.
It's like 14 hours, and he listens to it while he's running. I'm like, dude.
Oh my God.
You're sick.
Oh, not to change the subject, but I'm gonna. The running that I'm doing. I wanted to ask you a question.
I just I did tunnels to towers. Speaking of, wow,
see
great
this?
segue. Here we go.
Hey, I swear we don't plan these things. No, I'm training for a half marathon, and it's going so great, dude. Like, I love running now. I got the bug.
You get over that hump.
Wait,
Once you get over the hump,
I'm over it. I ran 4 miles the other day. Dude, I literally came down John Dave's Lane without even realizing it because I was running. I started up at King Cullen and I ran up around the park. Anyway, but I hit like a very slightly downhill road by that elementary school up over there, and I was just. This is mile 3. I don't get tired anymore.
Yeah.
My legs don't hurt. I just truly enjoy it. Here's the thing, though. I have to do a long run on the weekends, right? My first long run I just did, which was 8 miles. Never done 8, not even close in my life. Most I ever did was 5, and it was half-assed. I ran 8 miles, no problem at all, dude. Felt fantastic. And I'm like, I go home. All of a sudden, I'm like, I got a headache. Like, really, it's really creeping up the back of my head. And I'm like, man, it just really hurts. Whatever. I go about my day. It was my mom's block party that day. So I had to get George on the train, my dog, get him on the train. And I'm like, yo, my head is like, I've never felt a feeling like this in my life. Then I start seeing peripheral flashes in my eyes. I'm like, I have a migraine. I've never had a migraine in my life.
Really?
Because I'm an asshole. And what I did was I drank a Coors Light right after my run because I was like, it dilates. Oh, no, once I felt the headache, because I was like, oh, that dilates your blood vessels. I'm constricted.
It's not the first thing I would have grabbed.
Absolute idiot. Like, total jerk. And by the time I get to my mom's, I'm like nauseous. My head's pounding. My sisters are great runners. They go, Keith, take an Excedrin migraine, pound Gatorade, and take a nap. Long story short, I did that, woke up feeling like $1 million. But dude, that hour and a half of that headache and the nausea, I thought I was going to die. I was like, maybe I blew a fucking blood vessel in my head or something. I wanted to ask you, you're someone who's run marathons. Did you ever get headaches after running a certain amount of miles? Or like, did you ever feel like you actually got hit by a fucking bus after a long run?
I never got headaches like that before. I probably had like mild ones where it was just like a hydration issue.
Yeah.
But during the marathon training was where I definitely had some scary body things happen.
Like with your knees?
Mostly my bowels, actually.
Oh, you were shitting yourself
First it was doing that amount of running I'd never really done in my life. And
you're running for 3 hours.
I would run first thing in the morning kind of on an empty stomach. Maybe I'll have like a little coffee beforehand because I know the danger of that. But just the bouncing of your stomach when you do it for an hour and a half, 2 hours, it just
the pavement, like your vision blurs every time your foot hits the floor. And I'm like, I basically did just get in a fight, kind of.
You're doing a pogo stick.
Yeah, like your head's getting clonked around your brain and shit. And my sisters are prone to them too. They're like, dude, every time I run more than like 6 miles, I have a little headache. And I think it'll get better over time. I'm just like curious, like, do I got to take an Excedrin migraine every Saturday now? Like, we'll see.
I think a big thing for me too is putting salt in my water too.
Okay,
it helps a lot with hydration and cramps and stuff. So
yeah, dude, bodily, cardiovascularly, I feel fantastic.
Yeah, I remember my lungs and my heart being no issue at all. Like they just get better and better and better. After a while, though, sleeping, especially for marathon training, when you're doing 13, 15, 18 milers. I remember sleeping and the pain in my legs. It wasn't like knee pain. It was just like
bone pain.
Yeah, it was like
structural pain.
Icing's not going to do anything. Massaging's not going to do anything. It's just like a deep bone pain.
Never forget the guy who ran this thing died.
Yeah,
and you're doing it all the time.
So my funniest marathon training story was I was living in Long Island City, so I had my 18-mile run. It's my first time ever doing 18 miles. Same like you. I crossed the 59th Street Bridge. I do like 2 laps around Central Park, and then I come back over the 59th Street Bridge. I think I'd paused in Central Park to like take a shit really quickly, like quick one, and then kept running. Across the 59th Street Bridge, it's like dusk, like getting dark out. And as soon as I, cross the 59th Street Bridge, hit my like 18-mile mark, I pause my watch, and I'm like, all right, I'll walk the rest of the way home. It's like another mile. I feel my stomach just gurgle. Like
it's an emergency.
Like Jeff Daniels, Jim and Dumb and Dumber, dude, like that.
Yeah.
And I think I must have eaten maybe like frozen chicken earlier that maybe had gone bad. And dude, within 10 seconds.
You had to go.
I had to.
You're going.
Like,
No, I'm
no,
going.
I'm going. I'm like,
no matter what.
I'm not going to find a McDonald's bathroom. Like, I'm going. So I literally, under the 59th Street Bridge, in between two cars, and it's still like kind of light enough out that like people could see me.
Yeah.
Luckily, there's not a lot of like traffic there, so I literally take my pants off, just like
you shit the floor.
waterworks between these two cars, and I'm trying to do it as quickly as possible because I just need to get out. So then I do that and feel better. Then I go ghost white, and like I try to just walk like another 10 steps, and I'm like, fuck, I don't know if I can make it home. Because like, one, I have this in my stomach, and two, like the cramps and the pain, and like I just can't even stand upright and walk. So I'm like, all right, let me just get to this bodega and buy a Gatorade. I had like $20 cash. Buy a Gatorade. Next door is the diner, and I just like sit on the steps, and I'm like, hopefully it passes. Another gurgle comes. I'm like, oh no,
man.
I go and I look like shit because I just ran 18 miles. I'm like dirty and sweaty.
I think you're a homeless guy now.
And like ghostly white. I see myself in the mirror, and I literally don't even want to see myself again. And I'm like, I go into the diner. I'm like, can I just use your bathroom, please? They're like, yeah. And I don't want to know what happened to the bathroom that day, but I like locked it was a public bathroom with like a urinal and like 2 stalls, and I just locked the door. I was like, no one else come in here, please. I think I like literally just passed out and like fell asleep for probably 10 minutes in there too. So I get out. I still am not the coast is not clear. I still have another half-mile walk on a main boulevard to my house.
You're going through
my apartment. I legitimately, as I walked out of the diner, was like, I'm gonna wake up with like EMT flashlight in my eyes. I'm like, I'm not making it home. I knew, like, I had accepted.
I cannot believe this.
I had accepted I wasn't making it. Like,
you actually felt that bad.
So bad. Like the worst easily worst I've ever felt in my life. And there's just like those like orange traffic dividers on the sidewalk, and I'm like, I'm just gonna like lay down here and like hopefully I wake up myself in 5 minutes, or some good citizen wakes me up and finds me help. Because Lauren wasn't home. I forget, Lauren was like on a trip, so I couldn't even call. Couldn't even call my wife, and like no one I knew was.
Now you're kind of like panicking a little too. You're like, what's going on?
And Lauren's also a PA, so I'm like, she might know what to do. I forget, for whatever reason, she was tied up where I couldn't access her, and I literally just did the thing where I'm like, all right, just make it to the next sidewalk crack, and I did that for a painful, probably, it's a half-mile walk, and it took me 45 minutes.
Oh
to get
my god, man!
Get to my door. And I just like sit in my bathtub, hot shower, as hot as I can, get out, and now I start shivering because I don't know why. I don't know. This must have been food poisoning.
You shocked your nervous system.
I think it was food poisoning.
Oh yeah.
So then I put on like 2 sweatshirts, sweatpants, like socks, beanie, gloves, and I'm just in my bed just shivering, and I don't know what happened. It was like the worst I've ever felt in my life. Terrible.
That sucks.
So go out there and sign up for the New York City Marathon, kids.
No, run marathons.
Oh yeah, that was terrible.
Fuck that, dude. I'm never. My brother-in-law he ran them too. He runs marathons a lot. Guy's psychotic, honestly, but he has stories like that too about shitting himself and like collapse, whatever. Like, you know, running for 4 hours every week. I mean, eventually you're gonna hit a wall. Like, you know.
I used to start. After a while, I started carrying just like Dunkin' Donuts napkins with me. Because I was like, I don't know when I'm going to have to shit on the side of it. And I did it a few times.
Dude, I will probably never run a marathon. The half marathon seems like enough of like where you can get the bug for running, you get in great cardiovascular shape, and you don't kill yourself, literally. Yeah. You know, but yeah, anyway, so I guess it is normal to almost die after running a long distance.
So now I'm not meant to run that far, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I said when I did it, like, I'm never running again. I'm never doing a marathon again.
You said you were getting back into running?
Yeah, I just did the Tunnels to Towers, the 5K.
But that's a 5K.
That's 3.2 miles. So that was,
you know, I did that once, a long time ago. It was fun.
It's so crowded though. Like, you're just trying to. You can't really run how you want to run because you're just avoiding people the whole time.
Right.
But it's still cool, obviously.
Yeah. Well, anyway,
what are you reading?
Nothing right now, to be honest with you. I can't even like pretend.
Listen to anything?
Well, that's what it is that I've just been on a music kick, and I'm really into like, I've just been like, you know, I do a lot of the reading when I just have free time, and I'm running a lot. So I'm just kind of like listening to books on tape and like whatever, but the books I'm listening to are just like, you know, biographical, like I'm finishing up Napoleon with that, and like I listen to a podcast and some music. So it's reading's taking a back seat as I spend my hours running instead. So
nice,
but I'm still learning.
Yeah.
Always listening to podcasts, reading, like listening while I run. But yeah, I don't really have much to add as far as the.
Yeah, no,
I know we're on a book podcast.
No,
but
I can't get enough of just like always trying to like consume something interesting. And what's like incentivized me is I don't always do it every week, but I try to do like my newsletter every week where it's like, here's what I'm reading, here's what I'm interested in, here's what I'm listening to. So that kind of incentivizes me to like constantly engage in something interesting, whether it's a documentary or a podcast.
For me, it's cyclical. I always go through a lull before I transition back into novels. Like if you remember, we first started the show, I was reading novels.
Yeah.
Then I went historical, and now I'm getting bored of history books because I'm like, I've read enough history for my appetite, and now I need to find another novel genre that I'm interested in reading about. Or in, like, it used to be like these like old school like classic novels. Then I got into these new age sci-fi novels, and so I don't know what my genre is going to be next, but I got to find a book or hear about a book that like I can tell I'm going towards fiction again. I always have a little break and then I go dive back into it, but it's never the same thing I was reading like a month ago or something, genre wise.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I need to read more novels, man.
Well, and we've had this discussion, but the novel thing to me, it's all about, like, I think that you have to go into reading it in our, like, the way we are and our personalities. It's not like some people don't like to read fiction books because it's like, it's not even real. Like, what is it? What am I going to gain from this? I think what fiction gives you is like what, to bring it back to Plato, what allegory in a cave, the allegory of the cave brings you. It brings you these like moral, metaphorical examples that you can apply to your own life. And like, it really helps when a story does that. Yeah. Because you imagine it in your head. And we talked about this, like, if you have something in your head that's like, you're constantly feeding into it and you're believing in it in a way, it will affect you in reality eventually. And every fiction book I've read arguably has had more of an impact on my life than a biography or learning about Genghis Khan or World War II or, I think that for me personally, those books impact me creatively, and they impact me. I like to think of things metaphysically a lot, like or what's the word? Metaphorically, not metaphysically. So I'm excited to get back into that. I just don't know what's gonna pull me back in.
Well, I think fiction teaches you empathy. Mm-hmm. Because when you read, like I'm someone who reads a ton of nonfiction, and it's just very, factual and just like do this and prescriptive and whatever, and just it's information, right? So you're kind of just, you become almost like a hyper rational person who only, like, I think very logically, and here I do this, and this is my structure and my discipline and whatever. Whereas a novel, it teaches you through a story to empathize with characters and the situations that they're in and their loved ones and their foes. Mm-hmm. And it teaches you that through a story, and you create this imaginary world in your head, like you said, where you're like, oh, I can imagine walking a mile in their shoes. Yeah, I can see this through their eyes, and like, wow, that's tragic, or wow, that's heroic, or you start to understand more of these human emotions. And I think I, as someone who's very logical and rational, kind of need the novel escapes to get that.
Yeah,
more
I agree.
Empathy.
That it's an escape from, Yeah. And I always find it interesting and fascinating that, all that's really happening if you were a fly on the wall is I'm just staring at a page with like symbols on it, and then I all of a sudden get a feeling.
It's almost like
isn't that like magic?
It's almost like hallucinogenic in a way,
yeah.
Right?
Like
imagine if someone said, stare at this wall and you will have a story happen in your head with a world of characters.
That's what I'm saying.
And like, that's literally what you're doing. You're staring at like a wall with just like a few characters on it.
Sure. And I get so like deep into it that I'll dream about the book a lot. Like I'll dream that I'm in the scenario. So I don't know what's going to pull me back in. I just haven't heard about like a novel that I've been interested in. Like the last one was Project Hail Mary that came out recently. That movie's coming out soon. But Yeah, I mean, like, something will pull me back in. I hope it's Chuck Palahniuk, one of my favorite
Yeah,
guys.
I need to. Where should I start with Chuck Palahniuk?
Start. I think he's one of those guys that you could, like, his last book, The Invention of Sound, was like so entertaining, man.
Yeah,
like it's because it's just so entertaining. Like it's so Chuck, it's so outlandish and ridiculous, but also his themes and concepts and the plots are so brilliant and they only get better. Like he's had some softballs, like Lullaby wasn't that good, but in my opinion, but I would tell you to start with The Invention of Sound.
If you had to, if like someone,
I can lend it to you.
If someone like just started following us and was like, Keith, what are like 3 like nonfiction books that you would...
Nonfiction.
Or fiction, sorry.
Fiction
What are
book?
3 fiction books that I should check out?
The Master and Margarita.
Yeah.
By,
a lot of people have actually messaged me.
Yep.
And like saying you inspired them to like check that out.
It's a really incredible... I know somebody who read that as a child, and they were like, they read it again because of that, and they were like, man, you weren't kidding. It really is profound. The Master and Margarita is a book I'd highly recommend by Mikhail Bulgakov. I would highly recommend The Invention of Sound by Chuck Palahniuk because it's modern and it makes a lot of sense if because those older books can feel a little distant sometimes. But The Invention of Sound, and another one, if I had to give you sci-fi, I do Hyperion by Dan Simmons. It's the only book to this day that ever scared me. Like I was scared.
So what were the 3?
The Master and Margarita, Mikhail Bulgakov, The Invention of Sound by Chuck Palahniuk, and Hyperion by Dan Simmons.
I haven't read any of those. So
Hyperion is the guy he's one of those guys that invented his own language for the book, like one of those people.
Damn.
But listen, I was reading it outside in a shed once, and I got through a chapter and I couldn't leave the shed.
Jeez.
I was actually scared. Writers can do that when they know what they're doing, and if the plot's good enough,
Yeah.
Terrifying book, but very good sci-fi. So that's a sci-fi, kind of a classic philosophical fiction book, and just like a fun book from Chuck Palahniuk.
That's good. It's a good list.
Yeah. What about you for nonfiction, or you don't have any yet? I'm sorry, for fiction.
For fiction, I probably couldn't give you a good list, honestly. I'm not the best guy for that. But for nonfiction, I could probably give you a list.
Give me 3 for the listeners.
I would say one that's like philosophical and you'll learn a lot about yourself is The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. Hard to describe, but I just cannot recommend it. That's like, for me, that was like years of therapy in a book.
Yeah.
And I think everyone should read it because you'll just learn a lot about yourself. The second one is biography. That is massive and will intimidate people, but The Power Broker by Robert Caro, about the life of Robert Moses, especially if you're from New York. Like, even if you only read 150, or pages or a chapter, like that book just is one of the coolest. And I've never met a person who's read that wasn't obsessed about it and doesn't just like, when I mentioned The Power Broker, or when I was carrying it with me and other people saw me, they're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So that is just like one of the best biography books. And then I figure I got to give one about like a historical event or something interesting. I'd probably say it's, in terms of the ones that I've recommended the most, I would say Killers of the Flower Moon.
Yeah. Coming out soon.
David Gran, right?
Yeah.
Or Endurance by Alfred Lansing, which is the story of Ernest Shackleton.
Depends on the person, I guess.
But they're
both great.
I'd probably go Endurance just because that's like more life stories within it. But yeah, those 3 for sure.
I'm going to ask you a quick question to wrap up the show. It's just a fun question. It's not like profound really, but I'm just curious. Can you think of the most the strangest coincidence that's ever happened to you?
Whoa.
Like the most, like, that blew your mind. Like, it was such an unbelievable happenstance of coincidence where you were just like, this can't be. There's no way the world's that small. One of those things.
I mean, probably meeting my wife, yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's a pretty big coincidence. Yeah. Okay. Well, just, can you give the quick?
Yeah.
Just the quick version, because
I'll give a quick. You've heard it and you know it. So the quick version was basically we met at like a mutual friend's party in the city, and I, thought she was cute and started talking to her, and then she was like, "Hey, do I recognize you? Like, did we study abroad together in Denmark?" And I was like,
it's so weird that her
shit.
saying, "Do I recognize you?" Like imagining Lauren saying that to you.
And yeah, so it turned out we studied abroad together for 5 months in Copenhagen, Denmark, in the same class. We took a class called Fairy Tales and Storytelling. So it's a fairy tale story, which also makes it kind of coincidence. But
oh yeah, sure.
but yeah, we had sat like 20 feet from each other in that class. Never met. We went to rival high schools. She was a cheerleader for the rival high school. I was a football player. So we had the same. We probably went to the same high school parties, same friends, everything. Never met. So basically lived. And also some of my best friends she went to elementary school with. She like dated in like 8th grade. One of my good friends, Tom.
Oh really?
Went
Tom?
to elementary school with.
Oh, that's so crazy.
So yeah, like there's more coincidences, but that's the long story short, basically.
I'm bringing it up because I had one happen to me recently with a
Yours
friend.
is probably way better than that.
I don't know. My friend left me a voice memo the other day, and that's unusual. Most guys just call, right? But he was like, "Look, dude, I can't call you right now, but I gotta tell you what just happened." And he goes, "Keith, I just got a new job, okay? And I just it's a brand new building, and it's old, and I don't know anybody here, and whatever. And I'm getting familiar with some of these people, and they're asking me, who do you know in the union, blah blah." And I mentioned your name, and the guy said, "Keith Sullivan, like John Sullivan's son?" And he was like, "Yeah, he talked about his dad all the time." He goes, "Oh man, you're not going to believe this." And he goes, "Come over here." And he brings him to his locker, right? Because in my business, when you replace somebody who's left, you usually get their old locker. So he goes to this guy's locker, and he goes, "Look at that picture." And in the guy's locker is a picture of the guy he's replacing with my dad from like 30 years ago or something. He goes, "The guy you're replacing was insanely tight with John Sullivan."
No
Isn't
way.
that so fucking... He goes, "Keith, I'm looking at a picture of your dad in my locker right now.
Wow.
With this guy that I'm replacing."
That's crazy.
How fucking small is the world,
That
dude?
is wild.
I mean, you never know like who you're talking to, bro.
That's cool.
That's a pretty good coincidence, right?
Yeah.
Like there's thousands of people in this union, and it's just so crazy that someone I know is replacing someone that really knew my dad very well.
Yeah.
Interesting, huh?
A quick one, but it just reminded me of like some of the craziest coincidences I've heard. My boss, his name was Michael Kennedy, and he was flying to like Arizona or something. It's a few years ago, and he gets to his seat on. It was like let's say he's 36A, and someone's sitting in his seat, and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, like my seat says 36A," and he's like, "Oh, my seat says 36A too. Here's my ticket." And they show the tickets side by side. They bring the flight attendant over, and she's like, "Oh yeah, it's both 36A. That's really bizarre. We'll figure it out."
Mm.
And then all of a sudden they realize, oh, our names are both Michael Kennedy. And same like middle, like Michael A. Kennedy.
Right.
They're like, oh, that's wild. Like what a funny coincidence.
Right.
And and then the lady is like, well, no, that the flight attendant is like, well, no, that's a pretty common occurrence actually. So
Yeah.
like that shouldn't have
Affected the
issue.
Yeah.
Like so like we would get plenty of John Smiths or whatever. So that's a issue. Like she goes, when is your birthday? And he's like, February 2nd, 1982. And the other guy's like, my birthday's February 2nd, 1962. Like, what the fuck?
This is where you wake up usually,
Yeah. Like holy shit. Like, no way. And my boss, Mike, was like, obviously he was like laughing like
Right,
us. Like,
I would
what?
be crying.
He
I'd
said
be like...
the other guy was like so disappointingly just like unimpressed. Because he was just like pissed. He was just like,
Well, he's also 20 years older, grump.
yeah, but he was like, this is fucking wild. Like, we should take a picture together. Like, this is nuts. Like, that is really... Imagine if you met Keith Sullivan, born on October 11th. Like,
Dude, I'd call everybody I know. I'd
so
be like,
bizarre.
are you kidding me?
Someone with the same name, initial, like everything. And you know what?
Birthday?
You know what's actually... And his dad's name, this is true. His dad's name is John F. Kennedy.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
And he was born like in 1965. So like
the year he was killed, probably.
or maybe not.
Oh, no.
He actually might have been older, but I don't know.
Yeah. That's a funny coincidence. That's a good one. I saw a video once, just to wrap it up, that apparently coincidences are a phenomenon that has been studied. There's data on coincidence.
I always love this. It's like, how the hell do you study?
Well, yeah, well, this is the thing. What they do is at least what they did in this study is they asked a bunch of people this question, and they answered it, and they cross-referenced how likely or unlikely this is to happen to you, right? And the more you look into coincidences, apparently it's actually not that crazy that this happened to you for a various amount of reasons.
If you do deep enough research, like you live in New York, the other guy lived in Long Island, like you probably circle
exactly, and there's only so many places people can be from, and whatever. And the takeaway from that is a truly unusual day is when nothing unusual happens. Because if you look up like crazy fame, like there are ones that have Wikipedia pages because they were so outstanding that this happened, and I can't think of any examples right now, but like there's something else like this in a phenomenological sense that like it's actually unusual when this happens or whatever, but like it's usually like coincidences oddly happen a lot, which is strange.
Yeah.
Because there's supposed to be this, can you believe this even happened? It's so rare. Like, but they actually happen all the time, which is strange, right?
That's just a really good like question to ask.
Yeah, it's a great question.
In like a room of people or something. It's a really cool,
because
you'll get fascinating stories. Yeah.
Totally.
Because then also, as you start saying them, I start remembering, and like you.
Oh, I can think of a million now.
Yeah, you can start thinking of a bunch. That's interesting.
Real quick, we have to talk about this. What do you think about the Mexican aliens that were uncovered and they did a CAT scan on them?
I'm gonna bore you. I did no articles. I've read nothing about it.
Well, listen, I just all I'm saying is I just can't believe that this is like, what the fuck are they
seems
talking
like
about? Like, well, that's what I mean. Like, why are they all of a sudden just like, oh yeah, sure, they're right here.
Yeah, it seems this can't be strange to me. Like,
can't be real.
I'm like,
but why would the Mexican government play a prank on America or the whole world for that matter? Like, all I'm saying is, can you imagine if it's real and those things are real? But also at the same time, it's like do not look up. It's like, what would happen if there really was an asteroid? It's like nothing. Yeah. People would just argue about it and then it would hit us and then that'd be the end of it.
That's really true.
So all we're going to do about these two potentially actual alien beings is argue about it, and then nothing's going to happen.
Yeah. And don't they look like way too much?
They look like those paper mache things you would make in fucking art class in like 5th grade.
They look like what a person who drew an alien would like
literally
make.
But then people would argue, well, because people have seen them. What else do you expect an alien to look like?
Yeah, maybe that's why I didn't research it at all.
It looks ridiculous. It looks like a doll, for Christ's sake.
Maybe that It's almost like the double bluff though, where you're like, I don't believe it, but maybe it's so stupid that it actually is true,
right? And that's right. Like it's like they can't
not believable.
This can't be the effort they put into this. Yeah, So maybe it's just we were expecting this Independence Day scenario.
And there's another reason that you can't trust the media because you're like, are they fucking with me or is this really stranger than fiction? Like I don't know.
I don't know, man. But dude, the results of the examination of the bodies was they're real. They have skeletons and they've been preserved for a very long time, which is why they look so dusty and shitty and whatever, like a mummy, And man, I don't believe in it or whatever, but like, what if they're telling the fucking truth?
That's why you got to be open-minded.
Yeah, be open-minded. Maybe that'll be the episode title. Open-minded.
We always find a way to end on a good quote like that.
Yeah, we do. Okay. All right. Well, let's wrap it up, and hopefully this worked out with the new camera angle. Probably not. Probably shouldn't even brought it up. But
thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time.